nice tonight to have Masterwork and the Worcester Chorus together, because yesterday would have been the day. You would have just spent a wonderful weekend together in New York City. It's the same weekend next year, but it's bittersweet that we can at least be together for this wonderful session. The first of several joint sort of shared appearances that the Worcester Chorus and the Masterwork Chorus are presenting together. Now, some of you would have heard Patricia Doyle, Trish, give a talk this summer in connection with Concora about vocal health, and she is going to give another talk this evening that will incorporate, because good vocal health and vocal technique, there's a lot to share across many different topics. But tonight, particularly, is focused on the idea of how to take care of your voice during the pandemic, when you may not be singing as much as you normally would. And we're just so lucky to have Trish. Any of you who have seen her before, she is a really prominent voice pathologist, speech pathologist, and she works in the Yukon Medical Center. And I know her work through various singer friends, because they are a team that puts voices back together again. And on top of that, Trish is also a great singer, everything from Bach to this very extraordinary belting solo in a gospel piece we did. I learned a lot about Trish that night. So in any case, it's great to see all of you. As always, I will be here, but I turn my camera off because you don't need to see me. And enjoy, if you have any questions, type them into the chat function at the bottom, and then Dana Lauducci from the Masterwork Chorus, the president, she will come back and MC the questions at the end. So over to Trish. Thanks.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to talk with all of you. I'm very excited. I love talking with choirs. It's like the happiest, most motivated audience I get to do these kinds of things for. And as Chris said, I'm going to talk tonight about sort of getting back into vocalizing in an online world, such as we are finding ourselves in the pandemic, and then also just some of the perils of our current sort of COVID situation. So my plan is to speak about that stuff first, and then we're going to go through a vocal warm-up that you can do at home and or use and adapt as you see fit. So let's get started. And I'm going to share screen here so that you can see my slides. Less of me, more of my slides. Okay. From beginning. Oh, resume. There we go. Great. So in March of 2020, our lives changed abruptly and significantly. Many people suddenly found themselves out of work and confined to home. And for those that are lucky enough to still be employed, our workday voice use may have been altered in a variety of ways. So working during the pandemic, if you're working in person, you're often having to wear or use different types of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and that includes masks and face shields and gowns and all kinds of things. You're probably social distancing, or you should be, or talking through a plexiglass shield. So these are all the things that would be in person. And if you're at home, then it's Zoom, more Zoom, maybe WebEx, and then back to Zoom, or WebEx and back to Zoom. So that has its own implications. And both of these scenarios can increase our vocal load if we're not careful about it. So masks dampen the sound so that we often need to speak louder, or we think we need to speak louder because we don't hear ourselves the same way. Social distancing means, of course, we're speaking from further away, which often, again, makes us either have to speak louder or we do speak louder. Online speaking often induces louder voicing because the sound quality is not as good. And then working from home also means we're less mobile. We're sitting at our desks all day. We don't have a reason to mosey down the corridor to say something to somebody else at their desk. And so, that can have an effect on our physical energy and well-being as well. And a more hidden factor is what people call general Zoom fatigue or mask fatigue, because when with all of these sort of barriers to communication, we have to focus that much harder to hear and understand those with whom we're conversing. And that leads us to increased mental and physical fatigue by the end of the day. I know for myself, I'm seeing all my patients on Zoom, and I'm having to observe and try and look at muscle tension and what they're doing with their faces, and listening to their sounds, and they're on, this little screen. And so it's just a lot more work. So, how do these things affect us as singers? So increased physical fatigue leads to decreased breath support. And increased mental fatigue can lead to, inability to pay attention to your own good vocal technique, more difficulty, sight singing or reading and learning music, or even just paying attention to your conductor. And so that can be a problem. And then increased vocal fatigue because of all this extra use that we're having to speak louder, and that puts us at greater risk for overuse or injury. Or we can also develop inappropriate compensatory muscle tension that then can also then put us at greater risk for vocal injury. So, fortunately, that does not mean that we're doomed. There are things we can do to try and mitigate these factors. So, of course, the number one thing, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Any vocal health talk you get is going to throw in a hydration plug, but this is another one. Getting adequate rest is going to be important. Getting up and moving around during the day is important. A common thing is, this is true for when you're in singing situations as well, but is really true for the whole mask, plexiglass shield, Zoom phenomenon as well, which is speak by feel, not by sound. And what I mean by that is know your body's sort of normal vocal effort level and try to stick to that. Not to find yourself talking like this because you're worried that someone's not going to be able to understand you. Slowing down and enunciating are great tools for increasing comprehension rather than just going to increase loudness. So a lot of times, just taking that little bit of extra time doesn't have to add extra strain to your voice. Taking vocal breaks is really important. And what I mean by that is not, an hour off, but just little 5-minute break here, 5-minute break there before you start your next Zoom call. Just take a minute, drink, swallow, maybe do a couple stretches, do some straw phonation, which we're going to do later. That to sort of rejuvenate your voice. Oh, and that's actually the next one, which is do vocal resets. So things that kind of make sure that you're not accumulating tension during the day in how you're using your voice. And then if you are, talking through a mask, like teaching or something really where you do have to project and you have these added barriers, you can consider a voice amplifier to try and mitigate how loud you have to try and be. The other thing, or the next thing that I want to talk about is that in addition to all of that, the coronavirus wasn't done dealing its blow to singers. Most of our singing came to an abrupt halt because of the pandemic, and most group singing activities have remained suspended, and for good reason, because You know, the science about COVID-19 and the contract tracing for several surges in cases have been directly linked to singing in groups. It's definitely a high risk activity. These are just two of the most well publicized examples of choral situations where one rehearsal led to a huge super spreader event. You know, just when we thought it was way back in March, we just had within the last 2 weeks this report of a choir that went back to singing um, with social distancing, with masks, trying to do the right thing. And the only thing that they didn't do was they ended up closing the windows because it was summer and bugs were coming in and they wanted to try and keep the insects out of the room. And now one person tested positive after that rehearsal, and one rehearsal has now resulted in 30 of 41 members with the virus. So, you know, that's a very sobering statistic. And so we really do have to be approaching coming back to singing in groups very, very carefully. The two main factors that dictate how easy it is to pass the virus or become infected are amount of exposure and time. And the CDC and research studies have suggested that being closer than 6 feet and vocalizing for more than 15 minutes are some of the general thresholds for increased risk. And then, of course, when in a singing situation, not only do rehearsals tend to last an hour or more, this is pre-pandemic, you know, but it's a lot of people really close together. A lot of choir spaces are not very well ventilated, as we all know. And then everything that we're doing as singers involves enhanced aerosolizing and droplet activity. We take bigger breaths, we exhale long, fuller out of our lungs. We're doing louder voicing and we're doing more sustained voicing. It's not like a little talk and then listen and talk and listen. It's a lot of this continuous surge of airflow. And so it just creates a situation that really makes it fraught with difficulty. So some people have continued to sing for church jobs by recording or live streaming from an empty sanctuary or from home. Others have done virtual choir projects where they've recorded with a click track, submitted their performances to be edited together with other choir members. A few have started singing together again, wearing masks, socially distanced, smaller groups. And perhaps some of you take voice lessons virtually, which will have allowed you to continue to work on your voice, even if you're not singing in a big group right now. But I imagine that some or many of you have really done not a lot of singing maybe since March, except maybe to music in your car or at home. And some of you may be retired, some of you may be unemployed because of the pandemic, and may have had very little voice use at all during the past few months due to the decreased social contact and then no choir practice. So this brings me to the second part of my presentation tonight, which is to talk about how to get back into singing after a long hiatus, such has been created by the pandemic. So as we move into this new type of choir year, it's really incumbent upon you to take a more active role in building and maintaining your vocal health and stamina. So that's really what I'm going to be spending the rest of our time talking about, and then we're going to be doing a warm-up together. So I often break down the concept of maintaining vocal health for singers into 4 principles: taking care of the whole self, monitoring for signs of injury and do not ignore them, warm up and cool down, and then maintaining a consistent vocal regimen. And it's really the first and the fourth principles that are most likely to have fallen by the wayside in 2020. And we just kind of touched on taking care of the whole self with the rest and the, vocal preservation and taking breaks and all that. So now we're going to talk about the warming up and maintaining a consistent training regimen. Studies in exercise physiology show that for any muscle system, you need to maintain an exercise regimen of at least 3 days a week to get any benefit. And maximum benefit is achieved in the sort of 3 to 5 day per week zone. So for example, how this applies to singing is if you're just doing one rehearsal and a Sunday morning service with your church choir, you should be inserting, 1 to 3 other 30-minute periods of vocal exercise during the week, and not just note learning, to maintain the vocal and physical stamina and muscle mass of your vocal folds. And that will help to stave off fatigue and maximize flexibility and range and your breath support. When we're doing these exercises, we definitely want to be addressing the body, breath, voicing, and resonance. So, lessons from sports medicine. And again, so this is not particularly talking about voice. This is just talking about all muscles in our body. That detraining occurs rapidly when exercise ceases. And inactivity causes a 1% decrease in physiological function per day. And that most physiological benefits of training are probably completely lost after 4 to 8 weeks of inactivity, which could apply normally to just summer vacation. But in this case, it certainly could apply to COVID-19 lockdowns. So again, what does that mean for singers? Well, like I say, even pre-pandemic, most choirs don't meet in the summer. Students, some teachers and conductors have reduced schedules in the summer. We all know what happens when we skip going to the gym for a while. When we return after a time off, we can't just go back to our old routine. We have to build up our stamina again. So that's not saying that it's not good to get a vocal break and take some rest. It's absolutely fine, but it's good to be maintaining some level of vocal use, even on your downtime, to, again, stave off losing some of that muscle tone. And if you know that you're coming back into a full schedule in the near future, then you should start ramping up your voice use about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time so that you're prepared. And then that can really help to avoid this phenomenon that I see a lot. My practice gets really busy around this time of year because all the teachers and students, singers and everything go back to school in the fall, and they all start using their voices like crazy after maybe not using them so much over the summer. And then a certain percentage of them then get into vocal trouble because of that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through a basic vocal warm-up. And then I'm going to also, after we kind of walk through sort of just getting you warmed up, I'm going to go over some specific exercises to do during the week to improve breath control, vocal stability, and pitch range. And we'll do some of these like together, like I'll be modeling them and everything. Obviously, I can't hear you when you're doing them because you're all muted. And then some of them I'll just sort of talk through what you would do because they're fairly self-explanatory and you don't have to actually do them to understand what I'm talking about. And I also do just need to make a little disclaimer. So, if you do have any physical restrictions due to health issues, you always need to, think about those before participating in any vocal, extensive vocal exercise program. And don't do any exercises with me today that might be contraindicated by your doctor, your physical therapist, your pulmonologist. I'm assuming otherwise healthy systems, okay? So Our warm-up is, warm-up for speaking and singing should include relaxation, breathing, voicing, and then exercises that carry over into whatever the task at hand is going to be. So teaching, singing, whatever. So we're going to get started with our exercises. I'm going to stop share so that you can see what I'm doing. So let me do that. All right. And let me just reposition here. You can all admire my Halloween bling while I'm getting set up here. Oh, no. There are too many screens open. Okay, there we go. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm on the wrong slide, are some stretches. So from a comfortable sitting position, the first thing you're going to do is just let your head fall forward like you're falling asleep in a chair. And you're going to hold this position for 3 to 4 slow, comfortable breaths, which will equal about 15 or 20 seconds. Why? Because studies in exercise physiology show that it takes 15 to 30 seconds for a muscle to actually benefit from a stretch. And it's when we are relaxed, we breathe about every 5 seconds or so. So 3 to 4 breaths equals 15 to 20 seconds and is much more relaxing than counting to 20. And then you come back up to center. And the next thing we're going to do is tilt ear to shoulder. And if you'd like, you can bring an arm across your body to the side that's being stretched and use the weight of your arm and gravity to provide some power in your fingers to massage. You can, sometimes I go further into my back, sometimes I go up further on my neck. It's whatever it feels like it needs some TLC. And then after you do your 3 to 4 breaths on that side, we want to balance things out. So we're going to go to the other side, ear to shoulder, arm across, and breathe. Make sure you're not holding your breath. I promise I won't fall asleep doing these, even though I could. And then when we're ready, we'll come back up to center. And then we'll do one more neck stretch. You're going to turn and look over your shoulder and hold that position and breathe. And then to get to the other side, rather than cutting straight across, we're going to roll in a big half circle down and across the front, leading with your chin up to the other shoulder. Look over that side and breathe. And then to finish up, we'll do one more forward roll back to the first side. And back to center. Beautiful. Okay, we've just stretched everything out. We're now going to do a contraction. So you're going to shrug and release. That one you don't have to hold because it's a contraction, not a stretch. So a couple shrugs just to kind of get those shoulders woken up, and then some rolls. Everybody knows this one. I think every choir warm-up does this. And there's a good reason, because it's a great exercise. It's easy to do. It feels good. It gets the blood flow into that area. Helps to kind of make sure you're not all Frankenstein before a rehearsal. So that's awesome. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a lateral laryngeal massage. So for this, what you're going to do is you're going to put one hand up on either side of your Adam's apple right in the front of your neck. Do not go under your ears, but right up in the front. You're going to feel your thyroid cartilage, or your voice box, if you will, underneath your fingers. And then what you're going to do first with one hand and then the other is I pull a little bit forward and press towards midline. So I'm going like this with my hands, and you can see the larynx rocks to one side and then rocks to the other side. So you're sliding your airway basically back and forth in your neck, and it should move very easily. If it doesn't, then that's a great reason to be kind of trying to get it to loosen. What you're trying to do is make sure that the muscles that attach from your clavicle and your sternum up to your larynx and down from your skull down to your larynx are not holding that larynx so tightly that it won't want to maneuver for all the fabulous things we have to do for pitch change and singing, register shifts, all that kind of stuff. This is a great exercise to stave off vocal fatigue. When you're feeling a little tired to get in there, some people will just naturally sort of go, oh, I'm so tired, and put their hands up here. This is just a little more focused. And you can actually do something about it. And then and I also use this as part of a vocal cool down after heavy singing and during intermission when I have a concert to kind of reset the larynx for the second half of a performance. So I find that I use this a lot, and I find it really useful. And then the last thing we're going to do for our stretching is a facial stretch. My name for this is lion face, prune face, but in yoga, there's other names for it too. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the prune face, which is like smushing your face up into the tiniest, as if you're trying to fit your whole face onto a little pinprick of a hole like this. And then lion face is the opposite. It's like you have a mane, and every hair of that lion's mane is being pulled out and away, so the eyebrows go up and the tongue comes out. And then prune and lion. And we'll do one more, prune and lion. So that should make your face all tingly, get all the blood flow. That's going to help with articulation. Also kind of give us a first look at, getting the jaw to not be tight when we go to sing. And it feels fantastic. All right, so now we're going to go to breathing. I can switch my slide. Yeah, okay. Get myself positioned here. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is a rib cage stretch. So you're going to, from a standing position, you can do this seated if you want to. I prefer to do it standing, but you can do it from a seated position as well. So you're going to raise your hands up over your head, and you're going to put the backs of your hands touching. I'll go down so you can see what I'm doing. I could back up too. And then we're going to stretch over to one side and just feel that rib cage getting a nice opening up. And again, you would normally hold this for 3 to 4 slow, comfortable breaths. And then obviously, guess what we're going to do next? We're going to go and we're going to do it on the other side. And open up that rib cage. We're going to need that when we're singing. Beautiful. And then back up to center. Then I turn my hands around so now my hands are together. And then lower your arms. I like to do that because it kind of resets the shoulder position for better alignment. And it feels great. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to wake up our breathing. Make sure that we're breathing abdominal diaphragmatically and not clavicularly. We're going to put the hand right on the belt line. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to blow out your air on an F sound. Belly should be pulling in as you make that F. And when you get to the end of the breath, just relax those muscles and allow the stomach to bounce back out again. So belly in equals air out, belly out equals air in. And release. And all this does is really just kind of, makes sure you're breathing correctly, but it also wakes up the range of motion of your breath. What we want for breathing, particularly for singing, is tone without tension. You want to be able to use these muscles to support, but you don't want them to get locked, because as soon as this locks, then you're going to switch to an incorrect breathing pattern. Okay, so now that we've woken that up, the next thing we can do would be to work on getting some control of the breath. So you can take a big breath. We won't do this because it will, there's no real need, but to take a big breath and then sustain an F or an S for as long as you can on one breath, just trying to keep the sound nice and even, which is just really sort of working your breath system, but also making sure that you're practicing evenly distributing your air to the end of the gesture, but when we translate that to singing, through the end of a vocal phrase. And then the last one that we're going to do for breathing is candle blowing. So now we're going to get things a little more vigorous here. We're going to do that same gesture of the F, but we're going to do it with the energy you would use to blow out a candle, and then you're going to immediately release. That'll bring your air back in, and then you're going to do another one, and another one, and another one. So you should, if you're doing this correctly, you could never run out of air on this exercise, because every time you release, you've already breathed in for your next one. So you shouldn't do like 3 or 4 and then feel like you have to stop and breathe, because that would mean you're tightening and not releasing in between. So it should be something like this. Hopefully I'll get so you can see my voluminous demonstrating belly here, where we go release, release, and if you were watching my face, which you couldn't do, but if you were doing that, you really don't see me. I'm not gasping for air. I'm not really having to do anything up top, because all of that work is being done just by the displacement of air below. And we want generally for the throat to just feel like a tube through which the air passes and not a source of work. Okay, so now we've sort of woken up our breathing. Now the thing about that candle blowing exercise, I will say, is that it should feel like you could do it all day and never have to stop. The problem is you can't, because you're not doing anything aerobic, and so you might, you could hyperventilate if you do too many. So I usually tell people, start with 3 or 4 in a set, stop, make sure the room's not spinning. You can do a second set. If you're really feeling like you've totally got this, you can do, 8 or 10 in a set, but don't overdo it. Okay, good. All right, so now that we've warmed up the breathing, we're going to move on to adding a voice. And at this point, I'm going to go back to sharing screen, because I'm going to go back and do a little bit of education before we do the voicing section. So let me... Where are we? This is us. Okay. So now that we're going on to talk about voicing, one of the broad categories of vocal exercises that we use a lot in voice therapy and in vocal pedagogy for singing is that of what we call semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, or SOVT, if you want to look cool or text somebody about it. And these have been used they've actually been documented its use for more than 100 years and various forms. And I'm sure that many of you have used them in one form or another. And so examples of SOVT exercises include lip or tongue trills, phonating through a straw, which is what we're going to do in a little bit, playing a kazoo instrument, or use of even voiced fricatives like zzz or v, all fall into the category of SOVT exercises. So I want to talk a little bit about what those do for us and why they're so cool. So the goal of SOVT exercises is to decrease the acoustic load or vocal tract impedance and to increase inertance. What? So let me explain. Excuse me. Acoustic inertance is the quantity which, after multiplication by 2 pi times the frequency, results in the acoustic reactance associated with the kinetic energy of the sound medium, also known as acoustic mass. And acoustic impedance equals the complex ratio of the sound pressure on a given surface to the sound flux through that surface expressed in acoustic ohms. What? So, since most of you, like me, are not all experts in acoustics, let me explain what this translates to in terms of improvements in vocal function. So, positive pressure or increased inertance in the vocal tract helps to keep the vocal folds apart and produces only a small amplitude of vibration, which means a decrease in vocal fold impact stress, or it means that your throat is more open, the vocal folds come together with less force. So the end result of that is less strain, okay? At the same time, Conrad in 1985 showed that a downstream resistance in a soft-walled flow channel can create an upstream oscillation. And what that means is that the pressure created at the point of the frontal narrowing, so the lips, the tongue, that fricative, the straw, facilitates a better vibration of the vocal folds. And then Andrade, in 2014 found that the use of SOVT exercises decreases phonation threshold pressure, which is sort of the minimum amount of pressure that you need to use to get the voice to start. And then finally, that it optimizes vocal fold closure so that the voicing that you produce when you're doing these is neither too pressed, so too tightly closed, or too breathy. And so it really does a lot of great things to kind of sort of optimally set up our systems for healthy voicing. And as I said, you know, there are many types of SOVT exercises, but the one that we're going to do today is straw phonation. And we like straws because they narrow the upper vocal tract, it lengthens the vocal tract, it's easier to do for some people that have difficulty producing a lip or tongue trill. But you do have to be careful. It doesn't work for everybody. It should feel like your throat is more open when you do it, and the voicing should feel less effortful, and your sound should improve. It's also quieter than lip and tongue trills, and so it may be better for use, you know, when you're trying to do something without disturbing people around you. So it can be used more easily, perhaps as a reset in a workplace situation. And it does have the it doesn't have the competing noise of like a lip or tongue trill. Some people doing lip trills hear like more than one pitch while they're voicing because of the vibration of the lips, and you don't have that issue when you're using a straw. So will any straw do? Sure. Length of it, the straw does not matter at all. Diameter does make a difference. Smaller diameter increases the resistance, logically. So it creates greater inertance, now that you're all experts in that. So like a coffee stirrer straw most closely approximates the flow resistance of the glottis during phonation, so where your vocal folds are vibrating. But I'm today using just a regular sort of drinking straw. I'm being environmentally sensible. Mine is sensitive. Mine is a metal straw. But any straw will work. And we just talked about all of these things. It optimizes your closure, opens your pharynx wider, decreases strain and effort, has an immediate effect, and it carries over well to general speech. So for all of these reasons, it's pretty awesome. And so you can use any SOVT exercises, but straw phonation in this case, as part of a daily vocal warm-up, or like I say, you can use it as a reset during your day, like between Zoom calls or between classes or before you have to go make a bunch of phone calls to try and kind of rejuvenate your voice. So now we are going to do some straw phonation together. And when we do this, if you didn't get the message about having a straw, don't panic, it's fine. You can learn from watching me. If you have a straw and you don't have water, that's also okay. If you have water, it's fun because you get to make bubbles and it increases the resistance a little. If you don't have water, that's more convenient. It's not quite as messy. And in that case, what you're monitoring is the breath on your hand at the end of the straw. So either way is fine. So the first thing we're going to do is just get ourselves acquainted with this concept. So you can grab your cup and your straw. I'm going to sit back so you can see a little more of me. And you're going to blow into the straw with no voicing. In fact, I'm going to stop share so I'm bigger here. There we go. So you're going to blow into the straw and just make bubbles like you were told not to do when you were a little kid, right? And just for visual, I did a little more water in my cup than I normally do, and you can see the perils of that because when you're making good bubbles, it definitely splashes. So that's why I'd recommended just enough at the bottom so it's kind of contained to some degree. Or you might find it refreshing to get some bubbles. That's fine. Okay, so now you get a sense of sort of how much bubbles you produce or how much air flow you have on your hand if you're not using water. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add voice. So you're going to voice into the straw, into the water. And what should happen is exactly what happened when you didn't have voice. You should have the same amount of bubbles that you had before, but now you have a tone. Now, if any of you do this and no bubbles happen when you add the voice, which would be something like this, then guess what? You are not directing your airflow orally. You're sending all the air out your nose, and you're not capitalizing on your oral resonance. And that is not what we want for the benefit that we need to get from the straw phonation. So bubbles or airflow on your hand are key. All right, so we do our sustained pitch. Just in a comfortable speaking voice range. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to slide up and down around a comfortable pitch. So again, this isn't a singing task where we're doing maximum pitch glides. We're just doing like in your sort of the animated speaking voice range. Notice if I go low or if I go high or if I'm in the middle, the amount of bubbles doesn't change. If the bubbles thin or cut out at any point, that would be meaning that you're starting to tighten and not get the airflow again up into the oral cavity, up to the front of the face, into the mask, all of those things that we want for good, resonant, healthy voicing for speech and singing. Okay, so now what we're going to do, sorry, like I say, too many screens. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, we've sort of warmed up with some of these glides and, you know, the voice is starting to feel a little limber. How do I carry this over into my speech? So we're going to say some sentences, and we're going to say them first through the straw, and then all right, now right now I'm saying, does it make a difference if you touch the straw with your teeth or not? You shouldn't be biting down on the straw. It should just be on your lips. You don't want to be clenching your jaw. And in fact, you want it sort of open. Think like if you're singing an ooh, ooh, you don't want to be, so you don't want to be biting on the straw. So hopefully that answers that question. So the first thing we're going to do, like I say, is we're going to say a sentence through the straw. Obviously, you can't say the exact words, but you're going to do the intonation pattern that you would do, and then we're going to pull the straw away and then immediately say it with the words as intended. So I will share screen again here, so you have the words. Slideshow. Okay, so the first sentence is, my voice and I just go with the flow. And we're going to say that first into the straw. I'm going to do it without water in this case, so you can hear it a little better what I'm doing. But I'm going to then monitor the breath on my hand, and I'm going to go. So it's all connected. I should feel air on my hand the whole time. And then as soon as I finish, I'm then going to just say it. My voice and I just go with the flow. My voice and I just go with the flow. Okay? And then I'm going to give you another example, so you get to try it a few times. Oops, I skipped the first one, obviously. Go back. Boop, boop. My voice matters. Let's do that one. My voice matters. And then the last one, this is the last straw. This is the last straw. And when you do that, where you go back and forth from the straw phonation to the actual voicing, you may notice that the voice comes out with a little more resonance. It may feel easier to produce. It may be richer. And those would all be good outcomes from your straw phonation. Good. So at this point, you've done stretching, you've done breathing, and you have now warmed up the voice with some SOVT exercise to kind of balance everything and get yourself ready. And now at this point of your warm-up was when you would now go and start applying it like we did with the speech. But if you were going to be doing singing, then you would now start doing your scales, or whatever it is that you want to do. So, and also I just say that with that, this is the last straw. This is where the bad pun part came that Chris was saying he didn't allow except for presenters. So that was my chance to do that. So if you were, working on your own, this is when you would go and start working with, you can even sing into the straw and then sing without the straw to try and, open up your singing voice a little bit. And then the next thing you would do would be, you could add some maximum performance tasks that are great for maintaining vocal stamina and function. So one thing that's really great to do on a regular basis is an E sniff, okay? And so with the E, you're closing the vocal folds. When you sniff in through your nose, you're opening your vocal folds. So essentially what you're doing is like little sort of maximum open, maximum close vocal fold calisthenics. So you're doing E, 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 and do 3 or 4 of them. You can do a couple sets, and that just sort of helps to keep the open and close nerve function working well. This is also particularly important with aging voice to try and sort of keep everything, working fully and properly for as long as possible. Another thing you could do would be a maximum pianissimo production on an E or a Z, which helps to strengthen breath control and connection to the breath, to the voice. And you would do those as soft as you can for as long as you can, which maximizes the bang for the buck in terms of managing your breath, and also is very kind to the vocal folds because they're not working very hard during a task like that. So it's easy on the voice, works the stamina, helps to maintain your breath stamina. And then if you're not going to be singing on a particular day, it's still good to do maximum pitch glides. Again, I like to do these on some sort of SOVT exercise because it'll help you to monitor to make sure that you're not straining when you go up. But so if we're doing it on the straw phonation or I'll do it on lip trills just to show you. I would first go down and slide all the way down. Do that a couple times, and then to go up, you can either go straight up or you can also do gradually increasing sirens. So you could do, and that's going to give you a maximum stretch of the vocal fold. Or if you're worried about tightening at the top, you can do and do a pitch glide that way. And then, as I said, when we're warming up the singing voice, you should always start mid-range and then first do your scales going down. So you're contracting and then releasing the vocal fold muscle itself. So basically it's like doing a contraction and a release, because then when you go up high, you're going to be the vocal fold is going to get stretched and pulled long and thin, and rather than sort of taking a stiff muscle and then yanking on it to go up high first, you're kind of trying to get it to be a little more pliable so that you're less likely to injure yourself when you go to warm up your high voice. And I do often say to my singing students and my patients that if you want to work on the high voice, work on the low voice. It's a full muscle system. You don't want to just work the part that you like to sing in. You want to be working the whole thing because it has to be balanced. And then, like I say, once you've sort of done all these sort of training things, then you can start working on your repertoire. You can start working on more specific exercises to refine specific singing skills or work on problem areas. So in conclusion, I'm sure we all look forward to the time when we can rehearse together in person again. But in the meantime, I hope this information and exercises are really helpful to you. And I want to, if I have time, I want to just show you a video that I showed when I did the summer talk of some vocal folds during singing. So let me do one more share screen here. Here we go. Get there in a second. Okay. And okay, good. Oh, it's taking its time. Well, maybe I'm not going to play that. Play. Oh, there we go. Can you hear that? The coughing? No. Okay, hold on one sec. I have to adjust a sound setting, obviously. Hold on. Come on. All right, hold on. Turn off. I apologize for this delay. There's a setting somewhere. I can't find it. Try that.
Trish, we could always send the link around.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
I highly recommend it. It's quite an extraordinary video.
Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I don't want to, take up too much time trying to find. There's somebody, when I had this problem before, was able to direct me to a certain thing that allows to share sound with participants. But I can't find that. Wondering if your computer sound is turned off. I was checking that and I didn't see that.
But it is okay. I mean, we've just hit an hour, which is really
Yeah.
Okay.
There should be a box on the where you hit share screen, usually down in the lower left as you look at it.
Share computer sound. There it is.
That's it.
Is it? Can I show it, Chris?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. There you have it.
Hey, listen, no matter how many, and I've seen Trish give presentations a number of times now for a few years. It is always just so fantastic and so educational. I really love it. We do have a little time for questions. So if anybody would like to, either raise your hand. I just want to make sure that Dana can see everybody, or type it into the chat. Can I ask you a question, Trish? While people might
Absolutely.
So we, in all my choirs, we like to talk about healthy onset quite a lot as well. Not even with Concora, I do. It struck me that sniff E exercise, by the way, which if we had seen the scoped version of that, that would just be the vocal folds just keep just clapping open. And
Yeah, and that's why I was doing it with, yeah, so it's like E, 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 yeah.
That strikes me as a really great exercise also to get the vocal tract in position for that healthy onset to be right. Is that?
Yeah,
is that...
well, it does, because when you sniff in, that opens it. We're wired such that that does sort of open your airway and helps to sort of spread open the throat, because it's designed to help maximize your intake of air. So it does kind of lift the vault a little bit. And so you're right, that's absolutely a good one.
Questions, anybody? Paul Dexter.
Why does my voice get gravelly or sound more gravelly now, since I'm not in, tell me why I'm not in condition? Why is it gravelly?
Well, in what kind, like, since compared to what?
Compared with normal weekly singing. When I've been singing virtual choirs, and it's difficult, it's more and more difficult because my voice is more gravelly than normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think some of that comes back to what we were talking about with the that just with everybody's decreased, either in some cases decreased vocal use, but certainly decreased trained or technical vocal use. That can cause some loss of muscle mass, and then that, or it could be related to a decrease in breath support. And that's going to then get the vocal folds to not come as cleanly together and to not vibrate in quite the same way.
I believe that Allie has a question.
Okay.
Yes, hi, my name is Allie.
Hi, Allie.
Hi. So I am a cis female tenor, and I've been singing tenor for 20 years, since I was 18. I have a rather unique capability of being able to sing tenor 1, tenor 2, bass, and bass 2 range. And the problem is, because I talk so much during the day at work and then I sing, I'm starting to lose my upper tenor range. For example, I'm really only comfortable singing up to the G above middle C. And tenor 1, I have to sing a couple notes above that, or ideally.
Mm-hmm.
Can you point me to which exercises you were talking about earlier that can help me regain my upper tenor voice?
That is a really good question. Not necessarily one I can just go, oh, you just do this,
Okay.
because I would, need to know a little bit more about, your voice and how you're using it. And it, because some of it makes me think that some of it is that, you're getting some, like, from your vocal use during the day, then you're getting some vocal fatigue. I can't tell just by, talking to you tonight, maybe a little bit of swelling sometimes, which is going to then decrease your upper range and make that harder to access.
Okay, I do have a fair amount of phlegm in my voice sometimes, so I think that could be a reason. Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're working in general, when you're trying to kind of, work on that range, work on range. Again, like I say, you want to make sure that you've really worked the whole system, and not just, gee, I need to hit that high note, I need to get above that G. But to do things that go down to your low, which you're very comfortable doing, and
Right,
then
I'm very
come up
with the low voice. Yes.
Yeah, and then after you've gone down there, then to come up and do sort of things that then start to move you up into the higher voice. Again, I would do a lot of work with sort of glides in that area, and using, again, SOVT exercise like a lip or tongue trill or straw phonation, so that you're monitoring that you're not pressing to try and get up there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your guidance.
Carney, although Carney, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Carney. I'm from Masterwork.
Hi.
How are you? The great
Great.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question for you. I'm doing some WebEx, but I live my life on the telephone. And as it stands right now, the telephone is my cell phone and it's on speaker most of the time. And I'm finding that where my voice would get tired just being on the phone, I'm much more tired using a cell phone on speaker. I can't stand these all day long. They kill my ears. So do you have any suggestions about what I can be doing to try to feel less vocally tired?
Mm-hmm. So, and one thing, like I said, is that a lot of times when we're speaking on, again, speakerphone goes along with the Zoom and is that we overspeak. So, and the phone even too, because we hear ourselves differently. We're hearing ourselves through some external mechanism or through a mask or through whatever, and that changes our auditory feedback. And then that makes we're trying to hear ourselves the way we expect to. And so that makes us push. So that's where I come back to my speak by feel, not by sound, meaning that if you're warming up in the morning or if you're doing something with your voice and you want to get this idea of, I always say when you're warming up your speaking voice, you want to find what I call your no work zone, meaning if I breathe and I open up my throat, where does my voice come out without a whole lot of muss and fuss, with like some humming or something like that, where I'm just like, oh, okay, wow, when I do this, I don't feel a lot of effort, I don't feel like I'm pushing. This is where at this point in time my voice wants to be. So I'm not trying to pigeonhole it into where I think it should be. I'm sort of meeting it where it lives. So if I only got 2 hours of sleep, it might sit lower than if I got 10 hours of sleep and I'm feeling really well rested, or if I've dehydrated or I'm sick or I'm not. So you're sort of just trying to find that sweet spot where you're doing the least amount of work, and then go by feel rather than trying to hear yourself. If people can't understand you, they'll tell you, and then you can make some adjustments. But a lot of times people are over speaking really for their own comfort, that they can be heard rather than the other person.
It's funny because if people listen to me and they think I'm going to be an alto. I'm a second soprano. So if I speak where I should sing, I should be speaking up here.
No,
doesn't feel right.
No. I mean, people always. I'm a soprano too, and I don't talk up here like this. And I always tell my patients, don't try and only speak in head voice, or our speaking voices do go back and forth from your chest voice, and then when you go to inflect, then you go up into your head voice or your middle voice, and and that's normal. So you don't have to force your voice somewhere that
it doesn't belong.
Right, exactly. You want to go where you're doing the least amount of work, but you've got to be resonant. You can't be back here in your throat with no breath support, because that's going to fatigue you really quickly.
Trish,
thank you.
We had a question from chat from Les Blatt asking about the scopes. Where in the throat were those cameras?
So they're going in through the nose, and then they come down, behind your soft palate, and they're just sitting there above. So they're at about here. They aren't really that close to the vocal folds. You can bring them, in that picture, they were up pretty high, so that the singers could sing and maneuver. When a doctor goes in to look, you can bring that puppy all the way down to right on top of the larynx of the vocal folds if you're trying to get a good look at something. And if tolerated, you can even go subglottally.
As a professional, Trish, can you identify a person from a picture of their larynx?
Absolutely not.
We have time for one more question. Who gets the wrap-up question? I said, hey guys, thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us. Dana, thank you as always for being a great host. And Trish, you teach all of us new things every time. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so
It was really
then you work,
excellent.
all of
Thank
you,
you.
on your solfege and your ear training exercises. And I will see all of you next week. Bye now.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Trish.
Bye, everyone. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, Martha.